Well, like they say in Star Trek all the time, shields up! Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I wanted to talk not Star Trek, but Dungeons and Dragons. I got my armor on, and my shield, and my sword. I've talked about my shield before. This isn't about the shield per se. This is actually how, in Dungeons and Dragons, at least in the rules set, they totally lied to us about shields. Or did they? I wanted to mention how anytime I'm playing a video game and somebody appears with a shield, I'm always like, oh no. And in fact, my wife, who's a big Uncharted player, there are enemies that show up in shields, with shields in that game. As soon as they show up, she'll be like, oh God, not the guy with the shield. So, shields are unpleasant things in video games. And I would have thought, in real life, in the medieval period, shields would have been a huge benefit. They were, obviously. That's why we had so many of them. But according to the rulebook in D&D, these are not actually all that useful. And I thought, what? So, for those who don't play D&D, I'll give you the Cold Notes version here. You roll a die 20 to determine whether or not you hit your opponent or did you miss. The opponent will have an armor class, which, depending on which edition of the rules, you either want a really high armor class so they can't hit you, or you want a really low armor class so they can't hit you. It flip-flopped over the years, but suffice to say, your armor class will determine whether or not somebody can hit you with a sword or an axe or arrows or anything. What things help you with your armor class? Well, wearing some chainmail certainly doesn't hurt. And so does having a shield. Now, this would qualify as a medium shield according to the 2nd edition rules. I believe in the 5th edition, which they're up to now, this is more of a large shield or something, not sure. Regardless, I'm gonna go with just the overall, because the numbers have changed over the years, but generally speaking, in the early days of D&D, if you had a shield, it would provide 1 armor class bonus for you if you had a shield up. So you got your sword standing by, you're taking on your opponent, and you've got a shield to protect you. That's fantastic. But again, you're rolling that die 20, so you have a 5% with every kind of result that comes up, right? 1 out of 20. And with the shield only providing 1 unit of armor defense, of armor class, I suddenly started thinking, wait a minute, you mean this thing only gives you a 5% bonus or level of protection? If somebody, according to the rules, let's say they roll their die 10, they would hit you on a 10 or better. This is not accurate, but just for the sake of simplicity. If you roll a 3, oh, you missed. If you roll an 11, oh, you hit. That's great. This thing means that they have to roll a little bit better by 5%, by 1 number. So if it was going to be on a 10 or higher, and you've got a shield out, now they have to roll an 11. So again, it's like a 5% beneficial part of your armor class. And I always thought to myself, that's ridiculous. How can this thing... Now, this did change in later editions. I think on the 3rd edition D&D rules, they made it 2 instead of just 1 armor class bonus. Obviously, if you have a big giant wall shield, yeah, you get more bonuses, but we're sticking with like the standard shield here. And they made it 2 instead of 1. So now instead of only a 5% level of protection bonus for your armor class, now it's a 10% bonus to your armor class. So that person who used to need to hit you with a 10, now you've got a shield out. Oh, now they need a 12 instead of a 10. Again, not a huge level of protection if you consider how big this thing is and what amount of things it would be able to block. And I was gonna make this video a big argument of like, D&D totally lied to us about shields. According to all these video games that myself and my wife have been playing, shields are way more beneficial. Now, okay, I know what you're saying. in the case of like Uncharted or Tomb Raider or whatever, where the guys are coming up and they're protected with their shield out, and it's like a plexiglass riot shield or a steel kind of thing, modern equipment, modern, you know, materials going on there, and okay, it's deflecting bullets and stuff. I don't know if that's an accurate representation of modern shields that maybe riot police use. I don't know. So I'm not gonna use those as my kind of legal case for, look, in the video game, that shield is giving that guy way more protection than this 5 or 10% benefit in D&D. Okay, we're talking wood versus steel, you know, blades against a material that is designed to only stop blades. Okay, we're not on the same scale as the modern video games, but even video games like Elden Ring or Skyrim or whatever, you encounter somebody with a shield and that's a big deal. Or even fighting games. I think Bushido Blade, I can't remember. Some of those, like, not Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but the ones where people have got swords and shields and all that kind of stuff. The shield is doing a heck of a lot more protection than a mere 5 or maybe in a good version 10% bonus. This thing is giving you way better protection in games than it seems to in D&D. So what the heck, D&D? Why are you lying to us about how useful these things are? However, in researching this video, I looked up a lot of, you know, there are a lot of D&D and medieval reenactment guys on YouTube who do this kind of stuff. One of whom is Skallagrim, a really good YouTuber guy. He does a lot of different shield techniques and weapon techniques. He clearly knows his stuff. I mean, you can just tell by the way he's using his axes and his polearms. The guy is very, very skilled with medieval weaponry. And he did a very good one, the pros and cons of using a shield. And he brought up something that I hadn't actually thought about specifically with the D&D rules. Now, he mentions, for example, in history, when people started using shields, you suddenly noticed historical records indicating a lot of more people were getting leg damage than they had in previous eras. It's like, well, that kind of makes sense. Now that you've got this giant wall in your way, you're going to start attacking other parts of the body. Okay, that's an interesting point. Another one that he brought up, and I hadn't really thought about this, is, okay, you've got a shield and it protects you as you're throwing, you know, you're launching at your opponent with your weapon, and you're doing this to defend yourself. Yeah, great. But the battlefield is a lot more chaotic and there's a lot more moving around. And as you're doing this, you don't see what the enemy is bringing at you, right? Like you've got a problem of the big thing blocking, an obstruction blocking your view. How do you know what way to defend yourself? So the idea that a shield is just this automatic wall that stops all kinds of attacks is not necessarily true. Also, with these, I think he called center hand shields, the Viking style ones, you hit it here, the whole thing rotates as well. So you've got that to watch out for. And it made me think, you know, that's true. In Dungeons and Dragons rules, I'm thinking to myself, every time I roll the dice, that's me swinging my weapon. That's not true. I don't know if it's true with the later editions of the rules, but the one that I was started with, first or second edition, it was, the round was like a minute of parry and swing and block and all kinds of different actions that were going on. It wasn't just, I rolled a hit, there's your swing. Did you hit? No. Okay, I'll swing again. All right, there's your other hit. It doesn't work like that. It's actually a collection of movements, and I think even with the modern rules, it's still, maybe it's 6 seconds now for every one of these rounds that you're rolling for. In that 6 seconds, it's not just one swing. It's actually multiple attacks, multiple blocks. And I guess under those circumstances, it kind of makes sense that this thing, which I had thought, oh, it's an impenetrable wall that nobody can ever get through. Maybe not. Maybe, as Skallagrim points out, like, if you can't see half of the time because this thing is blocking so much of your view, admittedly, he also points out your opponent doesn't know which kind of an attack you're coming in with, so there's that benefit. But, you know, suddenly this thing that's a lot heavier over time, and this is just a wooden one, never mind the steel ones, you're gonna start getting tired, you're gonna start not being as effective with your blocks. And I just thought, maybe Dungeons and Dragons actually had it right. Maybe it is like a 10% bonus benefit to have a shield versus in video games making it like a 50% benefit. You know what I'm saying? And of course, somebody could argue, yeah, what about the old Morning Star? Okay, technically this is a flail. I always call it a Morning Star because it's got the star on the end of it. But this thing is designed to go, I'm not going to swing it, but it's supposed to go over a shield. As I whip it, it reaches over. I'm not going to inflict myself with a Morning Star here for your entertainment, but imagine somebody's coming at me with this. I put up my shield. Yeah, the handle hits this part, but then the ball and chain goes over and right into my face. That's, again, a good weapon to use in a situation like this, but is it going to mean this thing is completely useless or not? And they're going to have to balance these things. How do you make a Morning Star / flail? How do you give it a different rating to a sword? If you know what I mean. Like, I thought to myself, here I am immediately concluding that D&D totally lied to us about shields, and I'm kind of thinking now, maybe not. So hats off and thanks to Skallagrim for giving out the benefits and disadvantages. Benefits and disadvantages of the shield. I was thinking this thing is just this giant wall of power that nothing can get through like it is in video games. And now I'm kind of like, you know what? Maybe D&D had it right, because you've got 6 seconds or a minute, whatever the round is, whatever version you're playing. This thing is providing a good bit of protection, but it's also a fluid combat scene. The shield isn't just as impenetrable as it always comes across in video games. Interesting point. So thank you, Skallagrim. Thought I'd do a little video. I haven't shown out my shield for a while, so thought I'd do that. And until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.